Today I'm giving you an weather forecast assessment to compare literal observations that we can take outside and compare them to actual weather reports. So this was done on October 10th, and this also took place in my hometown, Lawrenceville, Georgia, as well as LZU, which is I fly out of that airport sometimes. And so the observations I took this morning were around 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on October 10th. The air felt very cool, as well as a little bit thin. The humidity felt lower than average, just based off of how it usually feels here. There was no sticky sensation or anything like that. I am in the south, so sometimes you get that. The temperature was very cool in the shade, but very warmth actually in the direct sunlight. So there's a little bit of a contrast there. So I'm expecting it to get warmer throughout the day. The sky was clear blue. There was not a single cloud in the sky. It was a little bit early in the morning, but also there was no fog or haze. Objects in the distance were very clear and not clouded at all. The wind, there was a steady breeze. You can definitely hear the rustling of the winds. You can kind of tell which way the wind direction was coming from, also based off of that. But it wasn't, the surface winds weren't too heavy, but you can definitely tell that there were some winds. So now that we have those observations, let's go ahead and compare them to the actual reports. So here I have the METAR from LZU. This was recorded at 7:56 local, and the winds were from 060, 10 knots, gusting 15. So again, there were some winds, but it's really not that bad. It was a gust spread of 5. The visibility was 10 statute miles. Sky is clear. Unfortunately, the METAR here was missing the temperature information. However, we do have the altimeter setting, which was 30.30. So you can see that it was sort of on a higher pressure level rather than low. So that does bring better weather. But luckily, in the general forecast, I did have the temperatures here. So as I predicted, it was a little bit cooler in the morning, and as the sun came out late in the day, it would get warmer. So about 9 a.m., it was 56 degrees. At 12, it was 68. I'm sorry, at 12, it was 65. So just like a 3 hour difference, it went almost up 10 degrees. So that's something that to keep in mind as you go for your flights later, is that your performance just isn't going to be as good later on. However, that's not going to be too much of a change. The winds also continue to increase steadily throughout the day or throughout the morning and then decrease later in the afternoon. But this does confirm VFR all morning. So go, no go. The weather was stable and it's clear. Again, VFR all morning. The winds may seem high for some depending on what you're flying. Maybe you're flying a little Cessna 150 and 15 knots might scare you. But honestly, LZU, the winds were from 060 and there's runway 7. So landing there and also taking off is going to be very easy with that type of winds. Biggest risks associated with the flight were some gusts, but again, it's just a really good day. The gust spread was 5 knots, so it wasn't anything crazy. So according to weather, this is a go for a local VFR flight. Reflecting the assessment, I feel was very spot on a very basic level. I wasn't able to determine important numbers such as like wind speed, pressure altitude. The radar is another tool that's very good to use. I just won't be able to see all that very specific information that I also find important. Um, the weather was very good today. I feel like if the weather was worse, like let's say it was cloudy, maybe there was low pressure, at that point, the observations you have to take a lot more in consideration. and that your prediction might not be as good, because that's when you have to really start questioning the weather. And so to tie that into like advancing aviation weather technology, like METARs, TAFs, radars, forecasts, they're just going to get better and better as the years go on. However, I want to abstain from over relying on it, because just because the METAR says VFR or margin VFR or whatever it is, the pilot has to be able to make the observations like we did today, go out and actually look at the sky, determine if the winds seem too high for you, look at the trees, look at the flagpoles, look at the windsock, see, the METAR might be really good, and then you go outside and immediately maybe see some lightning that's not being reported. And so those observations are very important, and you can't rely solely just on technology. Uh, I think maybe in the future, with AI tools, maybe it can help you make that decision whether to make a flight a go or no go. But I think that is just would be a little bit silly, because the pilot in command has the final responsibility to make that decisions. I don't think we should leave that decision on the technologies, but I can definitely see that happening in the near future, people doing that. So, in conclusion, I think observations match very well with an actual weather report. Observations can't give you specific information like the wind speeds, or maybe if there's going to be any future weather changes, stuff like that. And so the best thing to do is to be able to blend those observations and the technology together for the best results. And that's basically the safest decision that you can make when it comes to determining if weather is good for your flight or not.